So the title of this is 4.8. We wanted to build a little bit of mystery into this. You know, what does 4.8 mean? This is a presentation put together by the entire nutrition staff who's listed here. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me a question. If you have any hard questions, John Brulette, Kathleen Emery, John Anderson, and Phil Kruger are in the room. But the 4.8 mystery isn't quite there anymore. We've been talking about that all morning and even last night with the bottle of milk everybody got. But, you know, 4.8 could be an earthquake, measurement of an earthquake. It could be an interest on a line of credit. It could be turns per hour in a parlor. Or, as John Anderson said, our nutritionist in Minnesota, it could be the number of decades that the Minnesota Golden Gophers have won a Rose Bowl. So we know what 4.8 is, right? Anybody? Pounds of milk, right? Okay, maybe the mystery is how did we come up with that? And we'll get into that in a little bit. Well, we have a half an hour for this presentation. There's a lot of take-home messages we could try to cover, but there's just too many to do in a half hour. So there's two main ones I want to hit on. One is improved digestibility of forages for more milk. And second, this return on investment. We've talked a little bit about that. But you know, we could have also talked about improved cow health. The question came during Ev's presentation about improved cow health with using BMR. And I know that Cornell research that Dr. Stone did, he did measure some reproductive measurements and some herd health measurements in terms of metabolic problems, and did report a slight benefit on the BMR-fed cows. However, when you start quoting results like that, you have to be very careful because herd health and reproductive research takes an awful lot of cows to do to get a significant increase. So he did observe some benefits, but it's not something we really want to hang our hat on right now. Improved agronomics, Art talked about that before, and you know, we're in some cases a BST-free market, so this is another technology that maybe you can take advantage of. You guys have done a lot of management things to help improve your milk production on the farm, improve forage quality, facilities and cow comfort. That's been a big one. You know, how far has that come in the last 20 years? Milking frequency, use of feed additives, skilled staff, and just a host of other factors. But being from a seed company, we're going to focus on the forage quality issue. Well, on forage quality, you have variety selection. Ev talked about that really well. Correct harvest, you know, the proper dry matter, that's critical. Manage the storage and feed outlets, reduce the shrink that we get on some of these silos. Allocate it to the right animals, we're a big proponent of that. You know, forage quality started years and years and years ago when you harvest your alfalfas and your grasses. You controlled the quality of that forage, and you were really controlling the digestibility of that forage, the way you harvested that, because that plant laid down more and more lignin as it matured, but you didn't let it mature all the way to full maturity. You cut it before that. And so you were playing around with digestibilities for years and years and years. Now in corn silage, just really in the last 15 years, we've started looking at digestibility differences and quality differences. Would it be a fair statement to say 20 years ago all corn silages were pretty much alike and pretty much fed alike? I think, you know, the nutritionists in the room might agree with that. Of course, we're kind of lazy anyway, so. This is some data out of an independent lab in Wisconsin on the range of digestibilities we observe. This is NDF digestibilities across the bottom, and of course, you got your legumes, the grasses, and your corn silage. And just the range that you can see in digestibility of corn silage from the extremes, from a low of around 40 to a high of around 75. Just a big, wide variation that's observed. And Ev talked about that earlier with the BMR versus the conventional hybrids. What does this really mean to us? Well, Dr. Allen at Michigan State came up with this relationship that for every unit increase in NDF digestibility, cows will produce roughly a half a pound more milk. And the big driver of that is that they eat about 0.37 pounds more dry matter intake. So it's a really good relationship to know. If you've got a hybrid that's 10 units higher in NDF digestibility, chances are your cows are going to produce 5 to 6 pounds more milk. This is a pretty well-recognized relationship. I see it in a lot of the meetings I go to now. When we compare BMR to traditional hybrids, there's different time points that we can measure digestibility. And there's kind of a debate going on right now is what time point do we look at? Well, with BMR, it really doesn't matter if you look at 12 hours, 24 hours, or 48 hours. It's still superior than the conventional hybrids. And if you put a percentage unit to that, at 12 hours, BMR is about 40% higher in digestibility. At 24 hours, it's about 36% higher. And at 48 hours, it's about 20% higher. Now, I'm throwing percentages at you. If you remember Ev, when he talked, he saw a difference of about 10 to 12 units of NDF digestibility. That's what we have observed, and just about everything we've done is about 10 to 12 units of digestibility difference between BMR and conventional. So theoretically, if we look at that Allen relationship, because of those 10 to 12 units of difference in NDF digestibility, we should see about 5 to 6 pounds of milk increase, right? And that's kind of what we do see. What about the rate of digestion of BMR versus conventionals? Well, BMR averages about 5.17%. That's done an observation of 763 samples, whereas conventional was about 3.7%. That's about a 40% improvement. What's that mean? Well, this is a really busy slide, but what we've done here is we've done 2 rations and modeled them on a CPM dairy. And the rations are exactly the same, with one difference, is that in one case we replaced the conventional corn silage with the BMR corn silage. Didn't make any other adjustments in the rations whatsoever. Well, the model predicts then that the BMR fed cows are going to produce 2 to 3 pounds more milk, just simply based on forage quality difference. Now remember that based on NDF digestibility increases, cows are going to eat more as well. But just on forage quality difference, it looks like about 2 to 3 pounds more milk can be observed. This is a chart of research we've done on BMR in the last 15 years. And the way this chart reads is the university is given across the bottom, and each bar represents the milk production of the BMR-fed cows as compared to the non-BMR-fed cows. So we've got Cornell, Minor Institute, Michigan State, several Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota, USDA, Wisconsin, 3 Ohio State, Delaware, and Nebraska. And I've got to update that. We've got a couple more studies to put on there. But here's where the mystery is solved. That 4.8 comes from this data set. It's a summarization. It's the average of the milk response from all of these studies from independent universities. So those of you that get Horde's Dairyman or Dairy Today and see the Mycogen advertisements in there and it says 4.8, that's where that comes from. It's not our feeding data, it's the university feeding data that we're quoting. Yes? They're all different, and that's one of the things that's kind of a little bit scary about throwing a bunch of data up there, is that every study was looking at something different. And so dry matter intakes were all a little bit different, and you had some with high producing cows, some with not low producing, but some with not quite so high producing cows. So I don't have that number at the top of my head, but one thing is don't go home and think that you can grow a little bit of BMR and throw a pound of it into your ration and get a 4.8 pound milk response. It takes a little bit of it to make the milk response. If you do some calculation, this is the kind of milk response you might expect at the different levels of feeding. So if we feed 5 pounds of dry matter, which is roughly 15 pounds of milk, you might expect 1.3 pounds more milk. We usually recommend up here in this 15 pounds of dry matter intake, getting around a 4-pound response. Now that's a thumb rule. It's not a tried and true thing. Your farm, you might get different responses than what we have up here. Okay, return on investment then. You know, we've got folks from the west, folks from the east here, different cost and different price variables. So we wanted to look at that. Art alluded to this, the return on investment calculator that's available at our website. Also, Art has it on his computer. I think all the nutritionists probably have it on their computer. It's a real, they took a look at me as a lazy nutritionist and wanted me to understand it, so they made it very, very simple, okay? And it's really easy to use. I'm going to walk through an example. It's kind of some busy slides, but I just hope you can see that it's a really pretty simple tool to use. Okay, lights dim. Okay. Okay, I've broken this ROI thing out into several sections here just so that the screen isn't overwhelmed. But here's a dairy in Pennsylvania, started as a trial user, fed for 3 months, excuse me, got a 6-pound response, 4 pounds attributed to BMR. If you can plot your stuff into this ROI, it's very user-friendly. You put your number of cows in there, you can put your pounds of milk increase that you observed or that you think you're going to observe, or you can play around and say, well, I don't think I'm going to get but a pound, and you can look at that. You plug in your own milk price in there, whatever that might be, and then it calculates your extra income on per cow per day and extra income per year. Then you enter the pounds of silage is fed. In this case, we increase BMR, which is what we tend to do in feeding recommendations, is whatever your conventional rate was, we usually recommend to feed a little bit more BMR at the same time as reducing grain is what the observation was over here. So it calculates, and this is a there's an error in the calculation here, so don't even pay attention to that. But once it's fixed, it'll tell you how many tons of silage you're going to be using per year, so it'll give you a little bit of an inventory. Same thing for bushels of corn per year. And then you start putting some of your price inputs into this thing. Your silage cost per bag of seed. So you can put whatever you want. You know, you can put $280 for BMR and $90 for the conventional, whatever you want, whatever it is. You can factor in some discounts, and then you can factor in, well, more insecticide for BMR, maybe not, or chemicals. Maybe you use more on BMR, maybe not, probably not. And it's a miscellaneous thing. I know there was one done in California where we irrigated more on BMR, so we factored that into the ROI. A little bit more cost for the irrigation. Then you can input yourself what you think the silage yields are going to be. Do you think it's going to be a 10% yield drag? Do you think it's going to be no yield drag at all? Do you think it's going to be a 20% yield drag? You can put those numbers in there and you can get your return on investment. Then it'll calculate your silage acres needed, and this will factor in the reduced amount of grain that you've put in there, and you don't need as many acres there. So when it's all said and done, it calculates the return on investment, and in this farm's example, the return on investment was 6.5 to 1. Net income for the year was $168,000. BMR does cost more, but it does produce more milk. In this case, they achieved $40,000 net income for the 3 months of feeding. Cows dropped 4 pounds when BMR was taken out of the ration when they went to that 11 CFT stuff. Made the decision to grow again in 2008. This is a chart of their response to BMR. This is what we typically see with BMR, increase in dry matter intake, and we usually recommend a higher forage diet when we feed BMR. Increase in milk, and this is where they switch to BMR, is where this line is. Grain savings, because we do recommend you reduce the corn in the ration. Ev talked about it before. The energy level that's in that BMR is quite high. And those of you that might have experienced the initial introduction of BMR, it was kind of a train wreck in some ways because it wasn't fed correctly, because it's a pretty hot feed. And if you don't account for that, it can cause problems. So you've got to be very careful with that. Cow health, long-term reproductive, we'll talk about that. Okay, California dairy then, maybe a little different feeding situation, not quite as much corn silage being fed here. Saving 2 pounds of cornmeal, lower corn silage inclusion. The agronomics were adjusted for California conditions, and in this case, the return on investment was 6.6 to 1. Net income on this herd for 1,000 cows was 141,000. Again, this spreadsheet is built for your individual inputs, and so you can put whatever your inputs are for your farm and get what you think they are. We've played with this a lot. A lot of times the break-even price for using BMR is about 4/10 of a pound of milk. That's all you need to produce to pay for the seed cost. And as you play with it more and more and more, I know you guys aren't going to believe this, but as you play with that more and more and more, that price of the bag of seed is really negligible. It really gets lost in the translation when you start doing the numbers. Just an observational thing, Adirondack Dairy in New York gave an interview to a popular press magazine, and this is their numbers they gave to the magazine. What happened when they went to BMR. They reduced their feed costs by 47 cents a cow a day. I mean, they actually reduced their feed costs because they use less corn and some other things. Increased their milk income, less labor to treat sick cows because they had fewer sick cows. Veterinary costs were reduced, lower cull rates, and they improved their income by $668,000 per year. Pretty outstanding numbers. Again, that's their numbers reported in the popular press. So in summary, milk increases from improved forage quality, dry matter intake, and we didn't talk about it, but rumen efficiency. Increased net farm income from increased milk. You're in the business to sell milk. If you can increase milk, it's one of the best ways to increase your net farm intake income. We do decrease. We do decrease grain intake at the same time. And we haven't studied this, but one of these days we're going to study the long-term effects of a high forage diet versus a conventional diet, the herd health benefits of a BMR diet versus a non-BMR diet. It takes a lot of money and a lot of animals to do a study like that, and we just haven't quite gotten there yet. So the question then is, what impact does 4.8 have on your farm?